Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it's almost like a puzzle piece that doesn't fit anymore. So, Tyler, your transition was anything but smooth. Could you share with us some of your personal struggles and how it eventually led you to become a therapist?
So I failed to say this when he was talking. I was also a graduate, and when I got out of the service, I had the 1950s mentality, the post-war mentality, go to a factory, take care of the family, mental health, inconvenient, sweet. And I did a great job at that, wearing that emotional flak jacket for about 5 years until that got my back right. And after drinking all those suicide texts, all those different things, because I didn't want to address it, I ended up where I work now, at Roanoke, and they saved my life, and it's incredible.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Michelle, as a military spouse, you have a great outside perspective of seeing the struggles that a veteran goes through leaving the service. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges new veterans face?
Knowing there's 44,000 veteran nonprofits out there. And it's amazing that there's this many nonprofits, but it's so hard to figure out which ones to trust. And even where to find them, it's not a simple Google search. Everything is word of mouth. And especially within the veteran community, you're more likely to receive service from a resource that's been recommended to you from somebody else. So if you're not talking to people, if you're not saying, I need help, I'm struggling, you're not finding out about these resources. This is one of the reasons why I started my nonprofit, because my husband struggled deeply when he left the service the first time. Because civilian life didn't do him any good, so he got back in. And that's what happens sometimes. So getting connected to these resources, especially if you're not raising your hand and saying, look, I'm not doing well with civilian life, I don't know how to acclimate here. How are we finding these resources? How are we vetting them? It's very, very difficult.
Yes, absolutely. So Rachel is our newest veteran on the panel, having been out 3 years now. As someone who may still be in the thick of it, is there anything we may have missed or you would like to touch on further when it comes to the issues of getting out of the military?
I think that community piece is so important, and it's not just as simple as saying, well, we provided spaces for you. There's a Legion and there's a VFW and there's this here, right? How do you actually tangibly connect with people in the community? One of the things that I hit on a lot is culture, and honestly, just genuinely going back to human connection. We're on social media so much that we forget the power of a simple conversation. We forget the power of asking someone, how are you today? And genuinely being interested in their answer. I think we often ask people, how are you? And we expect good and to move on with our days. We don't go about our in-person conversations expecting to actually listen and care about what someone has to say. And so I think that that's the one thing that really made a difference for me when I first got out of the military, is just, instead of isolating myself, having other people reach out to me and having those genuine conversations in my day-to-day at the grocery store, when I'm walking around my community, when I'm talking to people, and not seeing you necessarily as a veteran, but as a human being. I think that's that key piece that a lot of us are really missing.
Yes, and that makes so much of a difference too. So we just discussed some issues. Again, we're not covering everything due to time. But how can we support younger veterans? What do younger veterans need in terms of support? So Juan, through your social media channels and coaching, what are younger veterans asking for the most in terms of support?
What I find younger veterans are asking more than anything is just empowerment. A lot of veterans that I see now are actually reaching out before they become veterans, especially through social media, which is something that I wish I would have done when I got out. For the longest, when I got out, I just felt lost, and I felt like I didn't have a sense of purpose. And the thing that helped me most was finding someone that had been doing it longer than me. So finding someone out there that has been doing it a little bit longer than you. It may not be the right resource, but it may also teach you what not to do. And there's a lot of different resources out there, as we mentioned. However, that personal experience, one-on-one, that new team leader that you find out in society that's been out a little bit longer than you, that I think is one of the most valuable things that a veteran can find down to the. I think the veteran needs that guidance and that leadership. They just don't know how to ask for it because I think we all expect veterans to have the answers. Because that's what it was for the longest, especially when you were in.
No, absolutely. And then we see people get out, we see the success on social media. You know, there's many veterans here that, you know, have been so successful. We see that and we compare ourselves. So I've noticed with my own social media, when I share the truth of how crappy it was when I got out and how I felt like it, and I also felt like I had no reason to either. So just seeing that validation, that really brings out, you know, what younger veterans see and what they need. So Michelle, what are some options for veterans that don't have access to a VA nearby, and how common is that?
So with rural veterans, I mean, for example, where I'm from, veterans are traveling an hour and a half to get to the VA. This is a huge deterrent for them to receive care, especially whenever they don't know that they can access the community care network. And in some cases, they're being told they shouldn't access the community care network. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's 4.4 million rural veterans, so about 1/4 of our nation's veterans right now live in rural America. And I think that number is underestimated because there's a lot of younger veterans who don't feel that they're entitled to benefits. They don't know what they qualify for, so they're not getting enrolled at all. So we have this population that's kind of at la la land, just fending for themselves right now. So what I'm trying to show people is that you can access the community care network if you're enrolled in the VA. First of all, you should talk to the VA. You should see what your benefits are. But you can also, if you don't want to make that trip, they have the telehealth network that you can access. There's also other options. So there's places like Sound Off, there's places like Headstrong, Care Possible, that you can go and you can get mental health services free of charge, anonymous, in your home. We're trying to work with legions to set up, you know, spaces where they can do that and access that if they don't feel comfortable talking about that in their home. So there's a lot of really incredible resources out here that people anywhere in the United States can access, whether it's mental health, holistic retreats, and even different types of holistic care outside of the VA. You just kind of have to do your research or come to somebody that has a little bit of experience and will direct you where to go.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So mental health has been a theme through this, and it's a hot topic for younger veterans. And so, as a provider in training, Tyler, what are most younger veterans seeking in terms of mental health care?
I want to be understood. I want a clinician that is culturally competent, that I don't have to explain basic stuff to. I want to be seen, validated. I want to have a space where I can talk, take what I'm saying, and not question the story. Because some people are incredibly uncomfortable. I've had folks that have shared things for the first time, and being able to just sit there with them. It's moving for me to know that they can share whatever's in that box, and I'm there for it. So, all of that.
Yes, definitely. Rachel, you talk a lot about the state of mental health in the military. What do you think the DoD should be doing to prevent the mental health crisis of veterans?
So I think the big question with the DoD and the people sitting at the top leadership is, what do we do to prevent suicide? How do we make mental health better? And usually their solution is, oh, we'll just read another instruction. We'll just put something out to the Chief's Mess. The current Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy put out a number of memos to the Chief's Mess, and it's great that there is awareness, but actually having conversations with people who are active duty, the leaders, the chiefs, the senior chiefs, and I am finding people who have a form of leadership where they say, I just do what I want. It doesn't matter what the instructions say. There's a problem there and there's a disconnect there. And so my belief is that it starts with individuals and it starts with those commands. We start with the small places, and that's where you're going to see that effect across the entire military. You can't really put out an instruction that is going to teach people how to be better people but you can set people up with the right tools to be better to their people. And so I think it's kind of a multifaceted answer here, but I don't think that the DoD is taking the correct approach right now to mental health or active duty. And I think we need to stop looking from the top down and look at these individuals and the smaller commands and figure out how can we fix this from within.
Yes, definitely. All right, audience, how many of you are part of a veteran service organization? All right, I'm preaching to the choir here. Because all of you you're obviously showing up, you're already doing the work. However, when veterans first get out, we don't always feel like we belong in veteran spaces, and it just takes some time. So when taking a poll in the Millennial Veteran Facebook group, most said no. And this is, younger veterans, most of them are not a part of a VSO. So in that case, we aren't like previous generations, where we are coming home to many of our classmates who also served. Most of us don't know many veterans our own age in our individual talents, so we don't gravitate towards these traditional places because we don't see our peers there. And community is key when it comes to meeting our needs for resources and connections. So how are younger veterans finding community? Rachel, I think you are the role model for getting out in your community and staying involved. Could you share with us how you have found community after service and the benefits that come with it?
Yeah, so it even took me a little bit. I mean, I obviously started with my podcast platform and finding a bit of community there, and there's an online space, but I'm a little old school and I still like the face-to-face, in-person interactions, and so up in the Pacific Northwest, there's a wonderful community called PNW Vets that was started by Josh Beelden. If you're familiar with that, that's been an incredible community. And I think what really stands out to me about PNW Vets is that in Island County, Washington, where I reside, there's about 5 or 6 of us that show up every month. And the thing is we're showing up, and we're posting on social media that younger veterans are showing up. And that's how you really start building that community, right? Because if someone's not comfortable going to a Legion or a VFW because they think, I'm not going to see someone like me in that space, then you have to create something for building that community. And so I think it's possible in really every community. Just find a small group of people and just continue to consistently show up. And it will grow over time, but honestly, even impacting 5 lives, that could be 5 lives saved right there just from showing up every single month. And so that's been really impactful in my community. We're working on building it in other ways, and some ways take more time than others, but I think what I really want to hit home on is that just showing up, regardless of how many people show up every month.
Yes, absolutely. And something I'd like to point out is we all have kids. A lot of younger veterans that are our age, they have kids. And a lot of these places, these VSOs, kids aren't always welcome. So it's just important to know that if we make it more accessible for veterans and their families, they're going to show up more. And another thing, we all have day jobs, we all have careers, so that's another thing. Making it on the weekend or, have multiple times where veterans can show up. So speaking of careers, many veterans find community through their careers. A lot of veterans are attracted to that fast-paced jobs, such as first responders. Juan, you yourself became a Chicago police officer after getting out. What are the good and bad parts of going from one intense community to another? And what advice would you give younger veterans who are taking this route?
Well, I love this question because it's something that I've been thinking about for the last couple of years a lot. One of the best things that, for me, going into law enforcement helped me with is that you feel like you're still in that same environment. You feel like you're still in one way, shape, or form. Fortunately, that's also one of the worst things about going into law enforcement. A lot of people don't see that because they think that, well, it just makes sense. It's a transition. I would like to encourage veterans that are getting out to understand that their skills are transferable. It just might not be the same thing in the same way that you see it. I love being in law enforcement, and I'm not discouraging anyone from that, but it's what I thought was next for me, from going from the Scouts and I worked to law enforcement, working undercover. It made me feel like it was all that I needed to do. However, because of that, a lot of my healing was delayed. I didn't get help. I didn't say the P word because everyone thought that if you went to law enforcement, you couldn't talk about PTSD. road, a lot of that kind of came to a halt. Folks with divorces, drinking all the time, smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. I realized that I had to take it upon myself to change individually and take ownership over myself. So I think that it's right to look for something where you can still give back and be of service to the community. But you have to understand that there are other things that you can do. It doesn't just have to be a certain approach just because you did one thing in the military.
Yeah. And I like how you said you gotta have a different approach to it, because let's face it, many veterans, we're attracted to these jobs. They're recruiting us in law enforcement, first responders. So I like how you mentioned just be aware of a different approach to it. Maybe if we had more knowledge shared about that, I think it would help a lot of veterans out there. Michelle, another issue we have is isolation in the veteran community, and it's even easier for veterans in rural areas to isolate themselves. How are you tackling the problem of the lack of community for rural veterans?
So one of the ways that we're doing this, we created our own online community. So within Operation Honor Roll Salute, there's an option for you to join our community. And within that community, we have a general forum, but then we have information that's directed for rural veterans. So we have job boards that are specifically rural jobs that fulfill the meaningful employment, because we know that employment is tied to our mental health. We have veteran finance, where you're getting information about how you can use your benefits to win with money. We have fitness and nutrition. So we have all these different ways that are directed to the issues of veterans and their families. But then our other option is that you'll be able to be listed on a map so people can actually meet up with each other. Because one of the really surprising things I found is in my small town of 1,500 people, I had an event, and I had people there that did not know that their neighbors were veterans. And they did not know that they were veterans until they were looking for their flags. I had one flag for every veteran from our county, which ended up being over 3,000 flags. And they were looking for their flags, and they didn't realize that their neighbors were veterans. So they started to talk and share in the community, and the community started to understand more about their veterans than they love and support. So that's one of the small ways that we're working at chipping away the isolation that happens in the veterans and their families.
Thank you. So Tyler, you bring together people every day by sharing personal stories, mental health tips, and talking about uncomfortable but necessary truths. How can we help younger veterans navigate the slippery landscape of online communities and create boundaries with social media?
First of all, social media is awesome. Secondly, it sucks. Because there's a lot of pain and it's so dysregulated with everything going on. But there's people like us, like all of you, that are helping the community that makes a difference. And it's important for the vets that active duty to understand that there are claymores out there, there's mines out there on social media that are pain-filled. For people navigating, and not just the younger vets, it's all of us. We have to be deliberate in the way that we use that stuff. Are we doom scrolling for hours, getting absorbed with everything? Am I scheduling an hour at the end of the day to get on there to look up so-and-so's page, or to just doom scroll for just an hour, though? Having those boundaries in place, setting the rules on your phone that can limit your usage, operating carefully.
Yes, carefully and intentionally, because they can get away from us so quickly.